So I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, who's very excited to be speaking right after Kimberly Hahn, who's informing. So this is Enda Nolan. He is married with 5 children and lives in Dublin. He started his career in engineering before transferring into banking. He now works in the central bank, where among other things he assesses strategies and cultures of large banking institutions. He has a keen interest in psychology, sports, and deepening the faith. And he's going to tell us about how to write a family mission statement. And then after him, we're going to have Roddy Stafford, a homeschooling father of 5 beautiful children with his wife Shauna, and he's going to give his testimony. So first of all, I hand you over to Enda Nolan.
So, thank you very much, Katie. It's probably going to be slightly a different presentation to Kimberly's, a little bit more, let's say, banking kind of practical focused. I want to begin with just consider Kimberly's presentation, and if you have a pen and paper, maybe just write down 3 aims or goals that you would like to achieve after Kimberly's presentation. So just take a moment and do that. Okay, so I'm going to structure the presentation in 3 ways. Firstly, we'll talk about goals, and then we'll talk about family mission statements, and then finally we'll talk about execution and how to actually execute your mission statement. So if I begin with goals, so are goals important? Are having goals important? And all of the research will say that goals are really important, particularly long-term goals. So long-term goals lead to better health, daily functioning, they lead to longer life. There's a proven link. If you have a long-term goal, if you have a mission or a purpose, you will live longer. If you don't have a goal, and particularly in kids, it leads to lower productivity, boredom, and there's a strong link between kids dropping out of school and feeling that they don't have a purpose. So goals are really important. There's also a new area of development called grit. Now, I don't know, has anyone ever heard of grit? So a number of years ago, the thinking was very much in terms of if one wanted to be successful in life, they had to have a high IQ. And then the thinking moved to, well, no, it's not all about IQ, it's actually about emotional intelligence, so how you actually manage your emotions. And if you're able to manage your emotions, you'll probably do quite well in life. The latest thinking is about grit. And there's a professor over in the States called Angela Duckworth who's wrote a really good book on grit. And she's basically proven that if you have persistence, if you're passionate and have persistence, you'll likely do very well in life. And she traced it back when kids have goals, particularly when they're young, and they actually go and meet those goals on a continuous basis, that they develop grit. So the point I'm trying to make here is that it's important, particularly for young kids, to be given goals and to go and meet those goals, because what you're doing is training them for later life. Because sometimes in life, things don't go our way. For example, our marriages mightn't be going that well. And so if you can teach your kids persistence, and if you have a goal and go and meet that goal, it'll lead to better outcomes when they're older. Okay, so the point is that goals are good. There are 2 types of goals. There are results type goals and there are action orientated goals. So maybe when I asked you to write down your list, there were very much result type goals. So a result type goal might be, I want to climb Everest. That's my result. I want to climb Everest. Or maybe some people here don't homeschool and your goal is you want to homeschool. And those goals are good, and it's good to have those long-term, that long-term vision. But generally what happens is when you go and implement those goals, you get quite disappointed. So for example, if I want to go and climb Everest and then I start climbing Everest, I'm not going to get very far and I feel quite disappointed. Likewise, if you want to homeschool and you've written down that you want to homeschool, if you don't know how you're going to actually implement that, over time you're going to feel disappointed because you just can't do it. So the better type of goal to write down are action-orientated goals. And action-orientated goals would be that they're quite focused on one point at a time, so it's more manageable type goals. So for example, if you want to homeschool, you might say, okay, for the next 6 months I'm going to try homeschooling. I'm not going to get too carried away with the future. I'm not going to say that all my kids are going to be homeschooled and they're all going to become doctors. But what I'm going to do for the next 6 months is I'm going to try to homeschool. And it's more practical and manageable. Likewise, if I want to climb Everest, as my focus for the next 6 months might be that I might start to begin and climb Dublin Mountain. And so that's an important point, the results type goal versus action orientated goal. The next point, just in terms of selecting goals, so I don't know what, like Kimberly's talk was fantastic, but sometimes I get exacerbated when I hear all of the things I should be doing. So some of my takeaways that I need to do theology, I should be French, I should be praying all the time with my kids, I should be talking about heaven, and personally I get sometimes a little bit exacerbated. And one of the things about goals, if you have too many goals, you lose focus very, very quickly. And so what I would encourage you to do in terms of goal setting is to have a small number of goals. Typically 5 goals. So a lot of the research will say, well, try to bring your goal setting down to about 5. One of the ways you can do this is you start and you try to write down a list of all your goals. So for example, 25 of your goals, and then you circle 5 of them. And they're the goals you focus on. The other 20 are really goals you should avoid because they will take your focus away from the 5 goals. So setting yourself up for success. So if you have goals and you wrote down goals today, it's a good thing. You are more likely to implement it. Another point about goals is committing to goals. So say, for example, you want to homeschool. And this is now a goal, so you've written the goal down. If you go and actually publicly tell someone that you're going to homeschool, you're more likely to do it. And I suppose the key point here is we have goals, we have a lot of goals in our head, and your kids can have a lot of goals, but when you actually take time to write them down and discuss them with someone, you're more likely to actually implement that goals. Another point in setting yourself up to actually achieve these goals are measurement of goals. One of the famous business lines is whatever measures improves, particularly in a work context, whatever measures improves. An example of this from my own work, and I see it all of the time in some of the banks that I go into, some banks can develop these fantastic strategies, and they can use horizon mapping, PESTEL, SWOT analysis, etc. But banks that typically have a good implementation program and actually measure how they're implementing that strategy do very, very well. The banks that don't do it, they typically don't do well. And we could, internally in the central bank, we can clearly see that correlation. So measurement of goals is really, really important. The last point, and I know I've spoken a lot about goals, the last point I want to talk about in terms of your goals is your resources. And one of the critical things about achieving goals is you generally need help in achieving those goals. And that's why coming to these functions is so, so important. So if your goal is that you want to homeschool or I don't know, if you want your kid to become a priest or a doctor, whatever the case is, look at your goal and say, well, what help do I need in actually achieving that goal? So maybe you might need to go and talk to Kimberly and say, Kimberly, how did you get your priest to become, or how did you get your son to become a priest? Or if it's, become a doctor and whatever, getting resources or getting help in actually achieving those goals is really, really important. So if we take a look at the 3 goals that you wrote down and maybe just, have a quick look to see, are they results-driven goals or actually measurable goals that you can actually go and measure? And then rate your goals. Why not rate your goals 1 to 10 in terms of how are you actually implementing those goals? Are you out of 10? So for your first goal, are you 2 out of 10? Or your second goal, are you 8 out of 10? Last goal, are you 9 out of 10? So maybe you might just take a moment to do that. So if you get into that practice of looking at your goals and continuously rating yourself against that goal, it's more likely that you'll achieve that goal over the long term. And that's a practice, that's something that we've done in our family, and it's worked really, really well. So we have a list of goals and we continuously monitor and measure ourselves against those goals. I want to move on to the mission statement, and really the link between goals and mission statement. And one of the key things I want to talk about here is cognitive dissonance. So if we start at the bottom of the hierarchy, and this is called the mission goal hierarchy, which the bottom of the hierarchy is all about actionable goals. So these are things that we do on a regular basis. So for example, if I want to give up smoking, the action is that I'm going to give up smoking. But if I move up the pyramid, then the next piece in the list is a value. So if I really value giving up smoking, I am more likely to stop smoking. So I believe smoking is really bad, I'm going to stop smoking. The next piece, or the next section on the hierarchy is identity. If I can identify as a non-smoker, I'm far more likely to stop smoking. So if I say, hi, my name is Enda Nolan and I'm a non-smoker, I'm more likely to stop smoking. And then at the top of the hierarchy is mission. So if I believe that my mission is to stop smoking and convert the world to stop smoking, that's the ultimate place I'm going to get to, and I really will stop smoking if I get there. Now you can use this process in lots of different ways. So for example, if you're a homeschooler and your action is you want to homeschool, that's your action. But if homeschooling is if it's a value of yours, you're more likely to homeschool and homeschool successfully. If it's your identity, if you can identify that you're a homeschooler, you're more likely to be a homeschooler no matter what happens. If you're having a tough time, you're more likely to continue with the homeschooling. And then of course, if it's your mission that you're going to convert the world to be homeschoolers, whatever happens, you're likely to be a really good homeschooler. So this can be applied in lots of different ways, and this idea of cognitive dissonance is quite important, where your behavior will drive your attitude. So let me give an example of my daughter. So my daughter, what we did is we got her into pro-life work. So she's now helping out with pro-life work, she's distributing leaflets. And because and I don't know how pro-life she was at the start, but we got her to do these activities. So we got her to hand out the leaflets, etc. And over time, she has now identified herself with pro-life by doing the actions. So in school, she defends the pro-life, she considers herself pro-life. And it's an important point. If you can get your kids to do actions, over time what they'll do is they'll identify with those actions. So say, for example, if you want your kids to become Catholic, or to really, really, identify as a Catholic, or their mission is to be Catholic, if you can get them to do actions related to Catholicism, over time they will identify as Catholicism. They will identify that they're Catholics, they'll stand up for their faith, etc. So in 5 or 10 years' time, when they're presented with, I don't know, if someone hands them a joint or whatever the case is, they will say, no, I identify myself as a Catholic, so that's not something I'm going to pursue. And that's a really important point, and for myself and my wife, we've learned a lot from that. If you can get your kids to undertake some actions, over time they will identify with those actions, and they will, it'll change the person they are. Okay, I'm going to move on to family mission statements. Oops. Okay. So family mission statements, are they important? Are they a good thing? Yes. I mean, what we always say in our house is, it gets us pointing in the right direction or in the same direction. So for example, if If all of us in our family are driving in the car and we want to get to Galway, then it's pretty easy to get to Galway. But if half the people in the car want to go to Donegal and the other half want to go to Galway and we've no sat-nav, it becomes a lot more difficult. So it's good to have everyone pointing in the same direction. Another point about family mission statements is this idea of grit, which I spoke about earlier on. And what we do in our family is we have our mission statement, but we also have actions that we try to undertake, say, for example, every week or every month. And sometimes we struggle with them, and us as adults, I think we struggle with action. So for me on a Friday night, I really struggle coming home after work. I want to have beer, and I want to have some crisps, and I want to veg out. And I really struggle with that. The action that I've committed to is to go to adoration on a Friday night. And sometimes I get there and sometimes I don't. Because on a Friday night, I just want to veg out. But what I do is I bring this to our family, we have a family meeting every Sunday, and I bring it, and I think it's really important that your kids see you struggling with these actions or struggling with these aims that you want to achieve, and actually overcoming them. And so that's one of the big points for us is that we are vulnerable with our kids. So it's not just our kids give an account of their actions. It's also we're held to account ourselves. Another key point in terms of family mission statements are the children imitate their parents, and I've read quite a bit in terms of impulse control, and we have a son who's very, very impulsive. And the biggest learning that we got from this is that your kids will imitate you. There's no question, they will completely imitate you. And if you're homeschooling, I think it's even exacerbated, your kids will imitate you even more. My brother-in-law will always say to me, every time I see him when my kids does something wrong, he always says, well, it's not off the ground, he licked it. And he's right, because all of the research will show that your kids will imitate your behavior. So if you're impulsive, it's likely your kids will become impulsive. And that was a big, big learning for us, and that's something as a family we discuss quite a bit in terms of if there are issues with one of our kids, myself and my wife, well, where did they get that from? The other point about family mission statements, I think they bring the family together. So what's our experience in terms of family mission statements? How do we implement it? So we have a family meeting every Sunday, and we have our mission, and we talk through our mission again, and then we talk about the actions in terms of how are we living that mission statement? Are there any additional actions that we need to do? And we try to keep our actions to approximately 5. The other point about mission statements is it's very good for decision making. So when there's a big decision to be made and you really, if you have a good mission statement, you should be taking out your mission statement and saying, okay, how does this decision, this is our vision, this is our mission, how does it fit in with our mission? So I'm going to go through the Nolan mission statement. And there's so many different templates out there in terms of missions or mission statements. There's loads of websites that you can go to. Some are very focused on virtues, some are very focused on spiritual side, whatever. Try to make it your own. That's what I would recommend. That's what we found. And really try to get the kids involved in it. So our mission statement is to know God, to love God and to serve God, to get all of our family to heaven, and use our talents in the best possible way to serve each other. So that's our mission, and we try to remind ourselves of that constantly. Some of the actions, though, they're very personal to us, and there are really some struggles that we have in the Nolan house. So one is we will say at least 3 decades of the Rosary every day at 8:45. And when I say, we put down a time there because going back to the gold piece, and I spoke about it being measurable, you need to put a time of when this is going to happen. And so we say three decades. We have small kids, that's why we don't say 5. And 8:45. At 6:45. When 6:45 hits, everyone knows that we're going to say 3 decades, and we just implement that on a regular basis. Why do I have it up here? Because sometimes we don't. And we remind ourselves every Sunday that we need to do this. And we can measure ourselves and say, okay, this week, how successful were we in saying those 3 decades? The second point is parents will do 1 hour of adoration each Friday and not drink beer and look at TV and Netflix. So this is my one. And I struggle with it, and I continue to struggle with it. But I hope I'm getting better. The third one is each family member will have at least one activity that they will master, and they cannot give it up until there's a natural break. So what we try to do is to give our kids at least one activity that they're focused on. So whether it's playing the piano, whether it's learning camogie, whether it's speech and drama, and we talk about how are you getting on with that activity. And I think it's sometimes important not to be, it doesn't all have to be spiritual based. I think it's good for the kids and for their development. And the last point is we will have at least 3 family dinners every week. And I know Mary Louise said to me, don't put that up. But we struggle with it because our kids play football and sport and drama and I come home from work at about 6:30 and I run through the door, I lift one of the kids, throw them in the back seat, run to football, it's sometimes really difficult for us to sit down as a family, and I think it's really important to have family dinner together. And so we've put that on our actions. And so once we get comfortable with these actions, what we'll do is we put new ones on. So if we've mastered the 3 decades of the rosary at 6:45, which I think we're almost there, I'm going to put a new action on. So what's the next thing that we need to work on to get to our overall mission? So execution. Okay, so one of the key difficulties in terms of mission statements are actually, doing it on a regular basis. And so you're probably coming to this event and you're probably going to get loads and loads of ideas, and you're going to be pretty motivated coming home. And tomorrow you're going to go, okay, we're going to start doing a mission statement. You're going to talk to your husband on the way home, and it's going to be mission statement. Excellent. And what we do is we love new stimuluses, so we love new things. I've got a friend who, my goodness, 1 month it's all about mountain biking, another month it's all about piano, another month, every month is something new. And that's not uncommon because we are all attracted to new things. And the most difficult piece is to maintain something. So if you're coming home, if you're driving home today and mission statements is something you want to implement, just recognize that in 2 weeks' time, you're going to be fed up and bored with it and probably go on to something else like the 8th Amendment or the World Meeting of Families or whatever else is going to attract your attention. So you have to be very, very disciplined in terms of implementing this. Another point we've learned in our own home, the idea of today versus tomorrow. So we care about today far more than we care about tomorrow, and that's particularly for our kids. So let me put this in a good example. So say you want to lose weight, and you're going to say, I'm not going to eat any more donuts. Donuts are finished for me. And it's really easy to say that now, right? So you're sitting here, I'm not going to eat any more donuts. It's simple. And then tomorrow comes and you open the press and there's 4 donuts. And what do?
I'll start tomorrow.
I'll start the next day, but I'm going to gobble up these 4 donuts. And what's happening is when you think of the future, when you think of you in the future, you use the same part of your brain as you use to think about someone else. You're thinking actually about someone else. But when you have your 4 donuts sitting in front of you, it's a different part of the brain and it's very much the here and now. So one of the techniques that we've tried to implement is we try to bring forward tomorrow today, if that makes sense. So the case in the donuts, what you could do is you could have a picture of a time that you were incredibly overweight and put it on the press door and to say, if you eat all these donuts, you will end up looking like this. So it's bringing tomorrow, or the past back. But for our kids, that's something that, so my daughter has aspirations of doing quite well in school, and she has a particular goal, which I'm not going to share with you. And what we've done is we've got pictures of her achieving that goal, and we have it in her bedroom, and that's something that just continuously reminds her that if she puts in the work now, that she can actually achieve that. The last point I want to make in terms of difficulties is habits, and habits are they're a godsend, to be honest, and they take the difficulty out of doing something. The key point about habits is it has to be at the same time and it has to be at the same place, predominantly every day. But if it's every week, that's okay too, but in the same time and same place. So for example, we know 6:45 every day is rosary time. That's it. It's rosary. 6:40 every day. It's rosary. There's no thinking. We don't have to say, "Oh, we say the rosary tonight. Yeah, let's say it in an hour." Or we would do our family meeting. Yeah, let's do it tomorrow. We know our family meeting is every Sunday. We put the 2 small kids to bed, and then we have our family meeting. We know the rosary is at 6:45 every day, and it takes the effort out. And habits are really, really important. So just, if you can get into the habits, it takes the difficulties out of all of this. So if you really want to implement a mission statement and you're driving home in the car, agree a time, whether it's Sunday evening or Saturday morning, that you are going to start your family mission statement, and you're going to keep that up, and you're going to measure your goals every week at that specific time. The last thing I want to talk about, and is a little bit more fun, is the importance of our environment. And our environment is so important to us. And there's there's thousands and thousands of research pieces on this, and I'm going to give you an example of 3 which are a little bit more fun. The first one is, if you're shown a picture of McDonald's, subconsciously you don't actually even know that it's being flashed in front of you, and you're asked to read 2 A4 pages on Toronto. You are likely to read it 15 seconds faster than the control group, than if you hadn't been shown that picture of McDonald's. Why? Because McDonald's actually triggers something in your brain to go faster, because it's fast food. In terms of wine, 70% of the bottles sold in stores reflect the music playing in the background. So if there's French music playing in the background in a wine store, you're far more likely to lift a bottle of French wine. If there's German, you're far more likely to lift German wine. In terms of pictures, I really like this one. So if you put a picture in your fridge of a really clean house, of a clean kitchen, you're far more likely to ensure that your kitchen is clean. Or if you put a smell of citrus in your house, you're far more likely to clean your house. And this is proven. I mean, there's loads of research to back this up. So why am I telling you this? So it is really important, if in terms of your house and your environment that you live in, and if goals are really important to you, it is important you put them in a place that you see it. So constantly remind yourself. If your top goal or your mission is to really know God, to love God, and to serve God, remind yourself of that on a continuous basis. And you probably don't think it has an effect on you, but it actually does. It's been proven time and time again to have an effect. The last point I'm going to make is in terms of friendship, and they've done lots of studies on friends. And it's clear over time we mimic the actions, habits, and attitudes of the people around us. So if you're a Catholic and you're deeply in your faith, but you meet up on a regular basis with your old school friends who are atheists, etc. Over time, if you continuously meet them on a very regular basis, you'll actually become far more empathetic to them, and you'll start to mimic their actions and attitudes and behaviors. So if homeschooling is really important to you, and it's something you want to, it's a value, it's a mission that you want to achieve, coming to conferences like this is really, really important. Meeting up in those support groups is really, really important, because what it will do, it'll change your attitudes and habits and behaviors, and you start to mimic each other, and you will really be a support group, and there's so much evidence to support that. So that's about as much as I want to talk about. I'm going to hand over to Roddy, who's going to give some practical examples of being a homeschool dad.